I was silent when they loaded me. I didn't tremble in his palm, but the moment his finger kissed the trigger, I woke. The chamber roared behind me. Air peeled away. I spun through time, bone, empire. I saw him. That stiff coat, the hat too tight. The woman beside him still smiling, not yet afraid. I struck just below his collarbone. Soft fabric. Warm blood. The world didn't stop. It screamed, but I didn't hear it. Because I was already inside the end of everything. You know my name. But you never asked who I was. The empire that couldn't breathe. Before I tore the skin, you have to understand the body. They called it a kingdom, but it was more like a museum. Vast, beautiful, dusty, and full of things that hated each other. Austria on one side, German suits, train schedules, quiet churches. Hungary on the other, horseback nobility, tight borders, pride that bruised easy. In between, Czechs who wanted votes, Slavs who wanted flags, and men with maps who wanted to redraw everything. Every language was spoken. None could agree. Every prayer was whispered, each to a different god. The empire smiled on postcards, but behind closed doors it coughed blood. And down in the south, where the rivers bent like questions, there was a place called Bosnia. Not quite Austria, not quite Serbia, just angry enough to matter. And that's where he was going. The man in the coat. To show the world the empire still breathed. To make sure it didn't. But I was already on my way. Bosnia, the empire's forgotten room. If the empire was a body, Bosnia was the rib it kept pressing on. It wasn't Austria. It wasn't Serbia. It was the hallway where both whispered, "This one's mine." There were mosques with cracked minarets, churches that rang offbeat, and markets where Croats, Muslims, and Orthodox Serbs traded meat with one hand and curses with the other. The flag changed, but the roof stayed poor. Soldiers marched through Sarajevo, but they didn't speak the names of the streets. And the young, they were done asking. They carved freedom into the backs of school desks. They memorized poems banned in Vienna. They drank cheap wine and swore they'd burn something before they died. When the empire annexed Bosnia in 1908, they said it was a formality. But to the boys in the alleyways, it was an invasion. They didn't want compromise. They wanted history to end and start again with their name on it. That's what I was walking into. Not a war, a memory too loud to ignore. The young men who dreamed in gunpowder, they were boys. 19, 20, 21. Their coats didn't fit. Their shoes cracked in the rain. They had no armies, no borders, no titles. But they had time. And time is a weapon when all it does is remind you you're nothing. Gavrilo read newspapers that called him a dog. He memorized poems about kings being beheaded. He said, "The world doesn't care if I vanish, so I'll vanish loud." They met in cafes. They argued about Serbia, about freedom, about whether it was better to die alone or together and famous. Apis gave them guns. He didn't promise victory, only the chance to matter. And when the names were drawn, when they were told who to kill, they didn't cheer. They just nodded. Because in Sarajevo, they didn't believe in happy endings, only loud ones. Apis, the man who built the bullet. He was born with the name Dragutin Dmitrievich, but history only remembers his code, Apis, Latin for the bull. A beast of burden, a creature of strength and sacrifice. By the time he was 30, he'd already killed a king. A real one. The kind with a crown, a carriage, a mistress, and a country. 1903, the Serbian palace. A coup in the dark. Apis was there, not with speeches, with a pistol. He fired it 6 times. 2 of them after the man was dead. They said he did it for the nation. He said he did it because no one else would. After that, they promoted him. Because in kingdoms held together by fear, men like Apis are more useful than loyal ones. They made him head of military intelligence. But what he really built was a shadow government. A secret society for men who believed Serbia didn't end at its borders. They called it the Black Hand. It had an emblem. A skull, a dagger, and a clenched fist. They swore oaths in blood. They carried cyanide for when things went wrong. To Apis, diplomacy was theater, politics, paper, and perfume. Real change came in explosions, in young men, in bullets smuggled across rivers. When Austria took Bosnia in 1908, Apis didn't blink, but he remembered. And he waited. Then came the perfect target, Franz Ferdinand, the reformer, the one man who might give the Slavs just enough freedom to keep them quiet forever. To Apis, that was treason in disguise. Better to kill the prince and let the empire punish itself. He didn't draw the pistols himself. He didn't ride to Sarajevo. He stayed in Belgrade. He played chess. He sent telegrams, and he smiled when the wind changed. He didn't need credit. He needed results. And when the boys left with the guns, he told them nothing of glory, only this: history forgets cowards. Franz, the last march of the unwanted heir. He wasn't supposed to rule. He was never the favorite. Franz Ferdinand was the nephew, not the son. Heir by accident, resented by design. He was too sharp for court banquets, too blunt for salons, too proud to flatter old generals. He married for love, and the empire never forgave him. Sophie Chotek, a noble, yes, but not royal enough. They let him keep her, but not in front rows, not on balconies, not even in public portraits. She was allowed beside him that day in Sarajevo, only because it wasn't a state event. It was military, and they thought no one would care. Franz believed in reform, not revolution, not war. He wanted to give Slavs a voice, not to please them, but to keep the empire breathing longer. That scared Vienna, that scared Budapest, and that terrified Belgrade. So when he boarded that train, he carried plans for a federal empire, and the echoes of every man who thought that meant betrayal. He was warned, more than once. Don't go to Sarajevo. There are threats. It's the anniversary of Kosovo. But he went anyway, because duty was heavier than dread, and maybe, deep down, he wanted to be seen, one last time, beside the woman they told him to hide. The woman beside the target. They told her not to sit beside him, not at ceremonies, not at parades, not even in portraits. They said her blood was too thin for the throne, too old for children, too soft for politics. But he loved her anyway. And for one day, one unimportant military day in Sarajevo, they let her be at his side. She didn't care for parades, not for uniforms or medals or the way power stares, but she cared for him. And when he stood too straight, she knew it was because the Empire kept trying to bend him. He talked too fast that morning. He scratched his neck. Too little tells. She noticed. She always noticed. He said the route would be safe, that it would be quick. But there were telegrams he didn't show her. And the guards were watching the crowd, not the rooftops. She wore white gloves. The pin from Prague. She kissed their children goodbye and didn't tell them where she was going. Maybe she didn't know. Not everything, but enough to hold his hand a little tighter. When they stepped into the car, he told her she looked beautiful. She told him he looked tired. He laughed. And for a second, they weren't a throne and its rebellion. They were just Sophie and Franz. Two people trying to be together in a world built to keep them apart. Gavrilo wakes. He didn't eat breakfast. His stomach couldn't hold anything but fear. The others were quiet. One smoked. One crossed himself. One cried when he thought no one saw. Gavrilo washed his face in a cracked basin. The water was cold, but not colder than his hands. He checked the pistol. He checked the capsule, then checked them again. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a killer, just a boy too proud to run. There were 6 of them on the route, but only one bullet that mattered, and it was in his coat. He wore the stiff collar Sophie hated. The metals felt heavier than usual. He looked tired. She smiled anyway. She pinned his sash, straightened his buttons. When their hands touched, neither spoke. He carried notes for a speech and a map for a future that wouldn't arrive. When the car horn sounded, he looked at her and said, "It won't take long." He didn't say, "I love you." Not because he didn't, because he thought there'd be time later. They were scattered along the Appel Quay, 6 boys. One road, one target. Gavrilo stood near Moritz Schiller's delicatessen, his hand in his coat, his heart in his teeth. He watched the first car, then the second, then the one with the man who wore an empire like a coat. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. But he didn't shoot. Not yet. She stepped in first. He followed. No guards in front. Just silence and metals. The crowds were louder than expected. Cheerful. Or pretending to be. Franz nodded. Sophie waved. They passed the first assassin. Nothing. The second. Still nothing. Then a glint, a hand. A shape too fast. It wasn't Gavrilo. It was Chabrinovich. The grenade left his hand too early. It bounced off the folded roof, rolled under the wrong car, and blew the sidewalk into sky. Sophie gasped. Franz shouted. The driver hit the accelerator. The assassin swallowed his capsule. It didn't work. He was dragged away vomiting. Gavrilo heard the boom, but didn't move. His hands were still steady, his bullet still waiting. They changed the route. No one told the driver. He turned left onto Franz Joseph Street, past Schiller's delicatessen. The car slowed, then stopped. Stalled in front of fate. Gavrilo blinked once, then stepped forward. The pistol rose. The bullet breathed, and I flew. They say I was made in Belgium, but I don't remember factories. I remember heat, pressure, and silence, the kind that waits. I lay still in a wooden box. next to others like me. Some would end in mud, some in practice. But I was chosen, lifted, held, loaded. His name was Gavrilo, 19, too young to carry the weight I held, too angry to care. He fed me into the mouth of a pistol, not with ritual, not with hesitation, but with the clumsy, shaking hands of a boy who believed he was changing the world. He had missed earlier. Others failed, but I waited. And when the motor car came again, when fate forgot to turn down that street, he pulled me forward. I did not ask to choose a target, but the air did. And so, I became history's answer to a question no one was ready to ask. The bullet hit more than bone. It struck treaties. It tore through telegrams. It ripped the silence between empires. Within hours, Vienna blamed Belgrade. Not the boy, not the gang, but the country they hated breathing beside. Serbia denied it. Russia promised to defend her. Germany promised to defend Austria. France stood by Russia. Britain blinked and sharpened its bayonets. Words failed. And when words fail, boots follow. July 23rd, an ultimatum. July 25th, a refusal. July 28th, a declaration. August 1st, war. August 2, more war. August 3rd, still more. August 4th, the world caves in. What began as a funeral became a chain reaction. What was supposed to be justice became trenches, gas, barbed wire, and moonscapes, because one man died in Sarajevo. 10 million followed, and I was only meant to fly once. But they kept making more of me, millions more, and each one whispered my name before it shattered another century.